Welcome to my channel. Subscribe to the channel and listen to my stories every day. It all began with an email, the kind that seemed harmless at first glance but turned out to be a grenade tossed into my otherwise steady life. The subject line read, "Exclusive invitation to William Fellowes Island Retreat." It was addressed to both me and my wife, Lucy. "Look at this," Lucy said, her voice tinged with excitement as she held her phone up to my face. Her enthusiasm was infectious. "Looks fancy," I replied, skimming through the message. William Fellowes was a client of our firm, a man I knew only through whispered anecdotes at the office. Wealthy, enigmatic, and perpetually surrounded by an air of mystery, he was the kind of person who could make or break careers with a single signature. Lucy's role as a customer ambassador meant she'd had more interactions with him than I ever had. My job in IT kept me tucked away behind screens and servers, far from the glamorous side of business. But now, here we were, invited to his private island for a weekend of networking and relaxation. "It's not just work," Lucy said, her blue eyes alight with a mixture of eagerness and nerves. "It's an opportunity. William doesn't do this for just anyone. We should go." I hesitated. It wasn't that I didn't appreciate the exclusivity of the invitation. It was more about the unfamiliar terrain it promised, an elite playground where people like me, a man who found comfort in routines and logic, often felt out of place. But Lucy's excitement was palpable, and I didn't want to dampen her spirits. "All right," I said. "Let's do it." The weeks leading up to the trip passed in a blur. Lucy spent her evenings poring over outfits, asking me how a particular dress looked or whether she should bring heels or flats. I gave her noncommittal answers, distracted by the creeping feeling in my gut. Something about the trip didn't sit right with me, but I couldn't pinpoint why. The day finally came. We boarded a private charter plane at dawn, joining a small group of other couples from the firm. William's presence loomed even before we arrived, his name slipping into every conversation like an unspoken deity. When we landed, the island was everything you'd expect from a billionaire's retreat: pristine beaches, sprawling villas, and a staff that anticipated every need before you voiced it. Lucy's delight was infectious as she spun around to take it all in, her blonde hair catching the sunlight like a halo. William himself greeted us on the veranda of the main villa. He was older than I'd imagined, his salt and pepper hair lending him an air of sophistication. He moved with the kind of confidence that came from knowing he could buy anything, or anyone, in the room. "Lucy," he said warmly, clasping her hand with both of his. "It's so good to see you again." I tried to ignore the way his eyes lingered on her a moment too long. "This must be Mark," he said, turning to me with an easy smile. "I've heard great things." I nodded, forcing a polite grin. "Thanks for having us." The first day was a whirlwind of activities. Snorkeling, kayaking, lounging by the infinity pool. William mingled effortlessly, making everyone feel like the most important person in the room. But it was Lucy he seemed most drawn to. He sought her out during meals, laughed at her jokes, and listened intently to her every word. I told myself it was professional courtesy, nothing more. By Saturday evening, my unease had grown into something I couldn't ignore. Lucy had spent the day glued to William's side, her laughter ringing out as they shared inside jokes. I'd spent most of it alone, watching from a distance and nursing drinks I didn't want. When dinner rolled around, Lucy emerged from our room in a red satin dress that clung to her in all the right places. She looked stunning, but there was something about the effort she put into her appearance that struck me. She wasn't dressing for me. "You look amazing," I said, hoping for some reassurance. She smiled, but it was distant, distracted. "Thanks." The meal was extravagant, as expected. Lobster tails, caviar, wine that tasted like it belonged in a museum. Conversation flowed easily, with William at the center of it all. He regaled us with stories of his travels, his investments, his philosophy on life. The others were captivated, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was all a performance. After dinner, as the group began to disperse, William approached me. "Mark, could I have a word?" he asked, his tone pleasant but firm. "Of course," I said, following him to a private corner of the veranda. The ocean stretched out before us, moonlight dancing on the waves. "I wanted to speak to you about something personal," William began, his voice calm and measured. "It's about Lucy." Every muscle in my body tensed. "What about her?" He hesitated, as if weighing his words carefully. "Over the past few months, I've come to admire Lucy. She's intelligent, charming, and, quite captivating." I said nothing, waiting for him to continue. "I have a proposition," he said finally. "I'd like to spend the rest of the weekend with her." "Just her?" My stomach dropped. I stared at him, struggling to process what I'd just heard. "I understand this might be unconventional," he added, "but I assure you, I have the utmost respect for your relationship. I'm willing to compensate you, of course. $100,000 deposited into your account." I let out a short, incredulous laugh, though there was nothing funny about this. "You can't be serious." "I am," he said, his tone steady. "Think of it as a business arrangement." Before I could respond, Lucy appeared. She must have seen the tension between us because her smile faltered. "What's going on?" she asked, looking between us. William turned to her, his expression softening. "I was just discussing an opportunity with Mark." "Opportunity?" she echoed, her brow furrowing. I wanted to tell her, to let her know exactly what kind of man William was. But before I could, she spoke again. "I agree," she said, her voice steady. I stared at her, hoping I'd misheard. But the look on her face, the calm, unflinching certainty, told me I hadn't. She had already made her choice. The words hung in the air like a bad joke, but Lucy's expression told me there was nothing funny about this. She had agreed. To what? To whom? My mind raced, my pulse hammering in my ears as I tried to piece together what had just happened. "You agree?" I finally managed, my voice barely more than a whisper. Lucy glanced at me, then at William, her composure unerringly intact. "Mark, I think this is a good opportunity, for both of us." "For both of us?" I repeated, disbelief coating my words. "You think this is good for us?" "Mark," William interjected, his tone even, as if he were negotiating a business deal. "Perhaps we should all take a moment to collect ourselves. Lucy and I can discuss the details." "No," I snapped, cutting him off. "You don't get to discuss anything. Not with my wife." William raised an eyebrow, his calm demeanor unwavering. "Mark, let's not let emotions cloud what could be a mutually beneficial arrangement." "Mutually beneficial?" My hands clenched into fists at my sides. I turned to Lucy, hoping for some sign of hesitation, some spark of the woman I thought I knew. But she only looked back at me with something akin to pity. "Mark, let's talk about this privately," she said, reaching for my arm. I jerked away from her touch. "Privately? You've already made your decision." She sighed, and for the first time, her confidence seemed to waver. "Mark, I still love you. This doesn't change that." I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that tasted like bile. "Doesn't change that? You just agreed to." I couldn't even say it. My stomach churned at the thought. William cleared his throat. "I'll leave you two to talk," he said smoothly, stepping away and disappearing into the villa as if he hadn't just tried to buy my wife for the weekend. I turned back to Lucy, anger and hurt warring for control. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I demanded. "Mark, please," she said, her voice soft but firm. "It's not what you think." "Oh, it's exactly what I think," I shot back. "You're willing to spend the weekend with him. For money. Do you even hear yourself?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "This isn't about the money. Then what the hell is it about? She hesitated, her eyes darting away from mine. It's complicated. Complicated? I repeated, my voice rising. No, Lucy, it's not complicated. You either respect our marriage, or you don't. Her jaw tightened, and for the first time, she looked genuinely upset. You think I don't respect our marriage? Mark, I've been supporting us for years. I've been putting up with your long hours, your detachment. My detachment? I interrupted, stunned. You think this is my fault? I'm not saying that, she said quickly, but the damage was done. I'm just saying. I need more. More what? More money. More attention. More, I trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. The lump in my throat was choking me. She didn't answer, and the silence was louder than any words she could have spoken. I can't believe this, I said finally, my voice breaking. I thought we were happy. Her eyes softened, and she reached for me again. Mark, I love you. I do. But I think I need to do this. For me. I stared at her, my heart breaking with every word. Then I guess you've made your choice. Mark. No, I said, cutting her off. If this is what you want, I won't stop you. But don't expect me to stick around and watch. I turned and walked away, my chest heaving with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. The villa was quiet as I made my way back to our room, the sound of waves crashing against the shore mocking the chaos in my head. Inside, I grabbed my suitcase and began shoving clothes into it. I didn't know where I was going or how I'd get there, but I knew I couldn't stay. Mark, wait, Lucy said, appearing in the doorway. I didn't look at her. There's nothing left to say. Don't do this, she pleaded. Don't throw everything away. I stopped packing and turned to face her. I'm not the one throwing everything away, Lucy. That's all on you. Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't let them sway me. She had made her choice, and now I was making mine. I'm leaving, I said, zipping up my suitcase. And when I get back, I want you gone. Mark, please. No, I said firmly. You've made it clear where your priorities lie. This marriage is over. Her tears spilled over, but I didn't stay to watch. I grabbed my suitcase and walked out, leaving her standing in the doorway, her sobs echoing behind me. As I stepped out into the cool night air, the enormity of what had just happened began to sink in. My marriage, my life, the future I thought I had, it was all gone, shattered by one terrible decision. But as I stood there, staring out at the dark ocean, something inside me hardened. I might have lost everything, but I wasn't going to let Lucy, or William, get away with this unscathed. Revenge wasn't just an option. It was a necessity. The flight back home was a blur. My thoughts were a whirlwind of anger, sadness, and a growing determination to take control of what little I had left. Lucy's betrayal had broken something inside me, but it had also lit a fire that demanded justice. When I arrived home, the house felt empty despite being filled with our belongings. Everything about it screamed the life we had built together. The framed photos on the walls, the bookshelves she had meticulously organized, even the faint scent of her perfume that lingered in the air, it all felt like a mockery now. None of it mattered anymore. I dropped my suitcase in the hallway and sat on the edge of the couch, staring at nothing. My mind raced, running through every interaction we'd had in the past few months, looking for the signs I'd missed. The late nights, the extra time spent at work functions, the growing distance between us, it all made sense now. She had been pulling away long before this weekend. After hours of tormenting myself, I made a decision. I couldn't undo what had happened, but I could take control of what came next. And that began with finding out just how deep her betrayal ran. The next morning, I reached out to a private investigator. His name was Eric, a no-nonsense man with a reputation for uncovering the truth no matter how messy it got. I explained my situation, every sordid detail, and he listened without judgment. "You want the full scope?" Eric asked after I finished. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I want to know everything. How long this has been going on, who else might be involved, and if she's been hiding anything from me." "Understood," he replied. "I'll get started immediately." The next few days were agonizing. I went through the motions of work and life, but my mind was consumed by the weight. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped, hoping it was Eric with an update. When the call finally came, it felt like a lifeline. "Mark, we need to meet," Eric said, his tone serious. "I've got the information you asked for." We met at a small coffee shop on the edge of town. Eric slid a manila envelope across the table, his expression grim. "It's all in there," he said. "But I'll give you the highlights." I opened the envelope and pulled out the first few photos. They were of Lucy and William, taken over the past several months. Dinner dates, stolen moments in parking lots, even a weekend getaway to a luxury resort I'd never heard about. "She's been seeing him for at least 6 months," Eric said. "And it's not just him. There's evidence of another man before William, someone she worked with." I stared at the photos, my stomach churning. The betrayal was worse than I had imagined. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a pattern, a choice she had made repeatedly. "There's more," Eric said, pulling out another sheet of paper. "Your wife has a separate bank account. She's been siphoning money from your joint account into it for the past year. It's not a huge amount, but it's consistent." My jaw tightened as I processed his words. Lucy had not only betrayed me emotionally but also financially. She had been planning her escape long before this weekend. "Thank you," I said, slipping the photos and documents back into the envelope. "You've done more than enough." Eric nodded. "What you do with this information is up to you. Just be careful. Revenge can be a dangerous game." I left the coffee shop with a renewed sense of purpose. Lucy had taken so much from me, but I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. She thought she could destroy our marriage and move on with her life as if nothing had happened. She was wrong. When I got home, I began putting my plan into action. First, I contacted a lawyer. I needed to ensure that I had the upper hand in the divorce proceedings. With Eric's evidence, I could prove infidelity and financial misconduct, which would work heavily in my favor. Next, I locked down our joint accounts, transferring the remaining funds into a separate account under my name. Lucy wouldn't be able to take another dime from me. Then I changed the locks on the house. If she wanted to come back, she would need my permission. Finally, I decided to confront her, but on my terms. I waited until I knew she would try to return home, hoping to find some semblance of normalcy after her weekend with William. When she arrived, she found the locks changed and a note taped to the door, "We need to talk. Call me." It didn't take long for my phone to ring. "Mark," she said, her voice trembling. "What's going on? Why can't I get into the house?" "Because you don't live here anymore," I said coldly. "We're done, Lucy. Mark, please, can we just talk? I can explain everything." "Oh, I'm sure you can," I replied. "But you might want to explain it to my lawyer instead. I have all the evidence I need, your affair with William, the other man before him, the secret bank account. Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" There was silence on the other end of the line. "Mark, I'm sorry," she said finally, her voice breaking. "I made a mistake. Please don't do this." "It's too late for apologies, Lucy," I said. "You made your choices. Now you have to live with the consequences." I hung up before she could respond. For the first time in days, I felt a sense of control. Lucy had tried to destroy me, but I had turned the tables. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Divorce, custody battles, and rebuilding my life from the ground up would take time. But as I sat in the silence of my now empty house, I knew one thing for certain: I wouldn't let her win. Months passed. The divorce process moved forward with the precision of a machine, grinding through every aspect of the life Lucy and I had built together. I leaned heavily on my lawyer, who ensured I retained the house, the majority of our shared assets, and primary custody of our 2 children. Lucy, true to form, accepted the settlement with little resistance, likely distracted by whatever promises William was whispering in her ear. I hadn't spoken to her since the confrontation, save for necessary legal and custody arrangements. My heart still carried the scars of her betrayal, but anger had given way to a quiet resolve. I was moving forward. Or so I thought. On a crisp fall morning, a knock at the door jolted me from my thoughts. I wasn't expecting anyone, and the kids were at school. When I opened it, I found Lucy standing on the porch, her eyes red-rimmed and her posture crumpled like a discarded paper bag. She looked nothing like the confident, poised woman I'd once loved. "Mark," she said, her voice trembling. "Can I come in?" I considered slamming the door in her face. But curiosity, or perhaps some lingering thread of decency, stopped me. I stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. She sat on the edge of the couch, wringing her hands. Her once manicured nails were ragged, and her clothes hung loosely on her frame, as if she'd lost weight. I didn't offer her a drink or ask how she was. I simply waited. "William's gone," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Gone?" I repeated, unable to keep the sarcasm out of my tone. "That's a shame." She flinched but pressed on. "He ended things. Said he didn't want the baggage." Her laugh was bitter, hollow. I guess I should have seen it coming. I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorway. "So, what do you want from me?" "Sympathy." "No," she said quickly, shaking her head. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything." The apology caught me off guard. I had expected excuses, perhaps even another attempt to manipulate me. But the raw sincerity in her eyes gave me pause. "I was selfish," she continued. "I thought I wanted more excitement, more freedom. But all I did was destroy the one thing that mattered most." Her voice broke, and she buried her face in her hands. I stood there, unsure of what to say or feel. This was the moment I had imagined countless times, the moment where she realized what she had lost. And yet, it didn't bring the satisfaction I had expected. "Lucy," I said finally, my voice even. "You made your choices. I can't undo what you did, and neither can you." "I know," she whispered. "But I need you to know how much I regret it. You didn't deserve what I did to you." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But before I could respond, she pulled a folded piece of paper from her bag and slid it across the coffee table toward me. "What's this?" I asked, eyeing it warily. "Proof," she said. "Of what William's been doing." Confused, I opened the paper. It was a printed email chain between William and one of his assistants. As I read through it, the pieces began to fall into place. William had been using Lucy, not just as a fling, but as part of a larger scheme to manipulate contracts with our firm. He had planned to use their relationship to push through unfavorable terms, knowing she wouldn't risk exposing their affair. When she had outlived her usefulness, he had discarded her like trash. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, my anger simmering just beneath the surface. "Because it's the truth," she said. "And because I know you'll do the right thing with it." Her words struck a nerve. Despite everything, she was right, I couldn't ignore this. William had not only destroyed my marriage but had also tried to sabotage my career and my integrity. If he thought he could get away with it, he was sorely mistaken. Over the next few weeks, I worked with my lawyer and the firm's legal team to compile a case against William. The evidence Lucy had provided was the final piece of the puzzle, and when we presented it to the firm's board, they wasted no time severing ties with him. His reputation, once untouchable, was in shambles within days. Lucy didn't contact me again after that. She moved out of town, leaving a brief note apologizing once more and thanking me for doing what she couldn't. I didn't respond. Months later, on a quiet evening, I found myself sifting through old photos. One caught my eye. It was from our wedding day. We were laughing, eyes bright with hope for the future. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness for the life we could have had. But then I placed the photo back in the box and closed the lid. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. It was a text from someone I had been seeing, a kind, thoughtful woman who reminded me that life after heartbreak was possible. Smiling, I picked up the phone and responded. As I put the past behind me, one thing became clear: Lucy's betrayal had shattered my world, but it had also given me the strength to rebuild it stronger than before. And that, in the end, was the greatest revenge of all.